If you'd like to contact the show, send us an email at liveonfourlegspodcast@gmail.com or get involved in the conversation on social media. Join the Pearl Jam Podcast community group on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at LiveOnFourLegsPod.
Oh, I'm so happy. So happy, not just because of you guys, but although that's quite a reason. We didn't expect this from, I guess we kind of forgot what it was like up here, but you kind of shocked us. We played Chicago last night. I was just thinking all tour like Chicago. Then that was done with, and we just didn't expect this. And you made a mark, so thanks. And away we go.
You're listening to Live on Four Legs, the live Pearl Jam podcast experience, featuring
Mr. Stone Gossard. Fucking Cameron in the drum. Mr. Boom Gasper. You can call me Al, you can call me Ed, you just fucking call me, why don't you?
everybody now. Welcome to Live on Four Legs, the definitive live Pearl Jam podcast. We got a lot of fun stuff headed for us today. We are doing Minneapolis, Minnesota, 1998. And Minnesota, when you think about that, and anybody that's within the community that knows our friends knows that there's one person that always seems to come around when Minnesota is being talked about, and that is Mr. Minnesota himself, Kirk Walton. We'll get to talking to him and his stories in a little bit. This is also a Patreon requested episode today, and we'll tell the stories from our patron Nate, and we'll get a little bit of his takes too. And look, we also have a brand new show that was announced that we kind of already knew, we kind of already guessed, because there was a nice little gap in between Atlanta and Nashville where it was the same weekend as the New Orleans Jazz Fest, a place that Pearl Jam has played around like 9 years ago in 2016, and then again earlier than that, 15 years ago in 2010. So Pearl Jam is going back to Jazz Fest. So we got some things to talk about. We got some time. We're not going to kill it. We're just going to kill it. So why don't we start there? Randy Sobel over here. Javier Eras over there.
Good evening, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to this one. We have a friend coming in just a second. We have a new show booked that we can talk about right now for a second or two. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a pretty good show. I'm excited about this one. 98 is a very cool year. It's always fun to go back and watch those shows, especially with the band. It's kind of like in the raw phase, if I will like to call it that way, but it's always so fun to go back.
And this is going to be a good one because with the Yield record and it being on the Yield tour, usually they have kind of a sequence of songs that they'll go to, like Brain of J and Faithful and Wish List and Do the Evolution Given a Fly are played nearly every night, but we get a couple of Yield songs that we almost never got to hear in 1998 at this show, and those should be a lot of fun. I think there's a lot of talking points. definitely surrounding a song like All Those Yesterdays, but also we get Pilot. And I don't know for sure if we've done a 1998 version of Pilot on this show before. So there weren't many of them, but I'm excited to kind of get to that. There's a lot going on here. So why don't we talk a little bit about our show number 11 here? Again, not a surprise to anybody that this would pop in, but one thing that's interesting is that, like, for the travelers and for a lot of people that are going from show to show to show here, it's a little bit out of the way to travel from Atlanta down to New Orleans. And maybe that's me thinking and not understanding the South enough. I don't think New Orleans to Nashville would be too bad, but that's kind of a hike if you're going along and you're following. But I think a lot of people in this community that I've talked to have been planning on it from the beginning. But every single one of these shows that we're getting, the non-festival shows, are going to have 2 dates. This is going to be the one outlier with one. What do you think about them adding this one in?
I think logistically it's going to be a challenge for people that they're going to be following around for every single date. Like you said, I think everybody kind of knew that we were expecting this announcement because like the dates fit perfectly fine for what the festival was going to be in the dates that it happens. I think the biggest point that I'm intrigued to is it's Pearl Jam going to try to reformat that setlist formula that they used for festivals last tour, or can we expect something similar, or are they just going to surprise us with more stuff, or can we expect the kind of like the look in corduroy startup? Like, I think that is a really good question that we can throw out there, you know?
Yeah, look, last year I think there was a lot to debate on with the Bottle Rock set. The first 11 songs ended up being the same first 11 songs as I believe it was the Madrid Mad Cool Festival set. So a lot of people were like, what the hell? This is not something that they do. And if they were to come out with that same exact first 11 as those two shows, I can see how people would probably want to rebel against. I don't know if it's going to be that similar. Like, I think that in idea, it's probably very similar. We know what a festival set is, and that seems like the kind of festival. I was looking at the bill, like, you have just so many different genres kind of being spread throughout, and it feels like the kind of festival where it's meant for the music lover. So, they've done crazy things at this festival before, and maybe when it comes down to covering for the podcast, when it comes down to that time, maybe we'll end up talking about one of those Jazz Fest shows. So we'll have to see. But until then, we can jump right back into Minnesota and introduce you to a good friend of the podcast, been a great friend for a very long time. He's been on episodes, especially episodes involving the state of Minnesota. He is a Timberwolves season ticket holder, a Viking season ticket holder, and probably a Twins season ticket holder. And who knows about the Wild? Probably that too, but he is who we call Mr. Minnesota around here. And anytime that we have a Minnesota show, we have to invite him in because he's a good dude, loves doing this, he's great for the community. So let's say hello to our good friend Kirk Walton. Welcome back, sir. Glad to talk to you here today.
Always great to be a part of the show, Randy, and Javier. Welcome as well, or hello as well, Mr. Minnesota. Hey, I will take the moniker. I'm sitting here with my Golden Gophers hat, wearing a Prince T-shirt, my Red Wings shoes, boots. I've got a replacements record on the turntable. I'm trying to do everything I can to uphold the moniker that you've bestowed, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Is there Land O'Lakes butter in your fridge?
Oh, 100%. Dude, yes. This one's a fun one. I think I'm probably not alone in sharing this, that this is my first Pearl Jam show. As many Minnesotans would know, this was the first time that we saw the band in 6 years. They had a smaller run here right away when 10 came out. Played First Avenue twice. For those that have gone to those shows, lucky dogs, of course, that would be kind of the ultimate venue to see your favorite band, of course, here in Minnesota. Pearl Jam also played Lollapalooza in St. Paul, but for those that remember that tour, they were one of the earliest bands to go on. And I know, Randy, we talked a little bit about before the show, probably because when they signed to be a part of Lollapalooza, that 10 wasn't really that big yet, or at least it hadn't taken off quite yet. It was in the midst of taking off right as Lollapalooza was happening. And I'd always heard too that they actually really liked being in that slot because they could just do their thing, get off the stage, and then see all the other bands that were playing at the show that year, in all the different shows, I should say. And then they also had a concert at Roy Wilkins, which is a really, really small venue. It's actually built into the Excel Center, what used to be the St. Paul Civic Center, which is where the Wild play. So this is kind of the first Pearl Jam is now big show that was in Minnesota. So it's the first time they played in an arena. It's the only time they've played a proper show at Target Center, which is where the Timberwolves play. The only other time they played there was the Target Company Party in 2009, and that coincided with the release of Backspacer, which a lot of people will remember had a very big campaign with Target.
Oh,
They
they
think they
were
got
they were corporate spokespeople that year. It rubbed a lot of people the wrong way for sure.
It sure did. It sure did. Not here necessarily, because anyone that was lucky enough to be an employee at Target at the time got a free Pearl Jam concert out of the deal. And by concert, I mean 3 songs. But still kind of cool. It's since then they've always played over at the Excel Center, which is where the Wild play. It's over in St. Paul. Much better venue when it comes to sound quality and acoustics, and just a better overall feel in general. Target Center is a little dated. That's going to get changed here sometime soon as they are looking to renovate it. But yeah, so where I was going is that this is really, for a lot of us, the first time that we ever saw the band, given the big gap that they had between 92 and 98. Of course, a lot of things went into that. The Ticketmaster war probably being the biggest thing, but Minneapolis was just or the Twin Cities in general, just not a place they went to very often.
Go back to like you being of that age, and you're in college at this time, I'm guessing.
I am, yep. Summer before my senior year.
So obviously you got all 5 records. They're on heavy rotation. So to find out that they're finally playing Minnesota and you got all this hype before you're going to the show right in the middle of summer, right after the solstice on the 30th, like what's the anticipation level and what do you remember like talking to friends about it? Like how was your preparation for this show?
Oh, I mean, off the charts for sure. Pearl Jam being at this point, they're certainly, if not my favorite band, they're in the top handful. I listened to a lot of Metallica then, so I saw Metallica for the first time the summer before this. So at least had that one crossed off. I'd seen Rage Against the Machine twice. That was my first ever concert. Was Rage Against the Machine at First Avenue. A nice way to get broken in, by the way.
Right.
But the band that I'd never seen, and being one of my favorite bands, anticipation was off the charts. If you remember back in the day, we went to Mervyn's of California, which is like a retail store. It was kind of like a Macy's, but just probably a
Never heard of that.
downscale version of Macy's. And you had to get there at like 8 in the morning, camp out outside, and that's where you bought the tickets. You waited in a physical line to walk up with, I believe, a checkbook or cash at that point to buy the tickets. Or you could have done it on the phone. There's really no buying tickets on the internet at this point. And I had not joined the 10 Club yet. We will talk about that as the show goes on, but that's how we got the tickets. So ever since we had those in our hand, we were absolutely fired up to be able to go to the show. And boy, did they ever live up to expectations. We'll just say that.
So I guess the question that I will have for you is like, okay, so you were trying to place yourself mentally around that time again, and we were talking about the expectations and like, do you have any sort of like, okay, there's a couple songs that I want to listen to? Were you talking with your friends about like, okay, we're gonna start with all the theories about we could have as a set, or the excitement was so big that you were like, just give me anything, we will take it?
I would say the latter. And being our first show, didn't even realize really what kind of band Pearl Jam was live, probably. Where, at that point, when you go to concerts, there's no setlist.fm. There's no forums talking about the show.
Whoa,
If
whoa,
there
whoa,
were, we
whoa,
just,
whoa. You just said a
maybe there
dirty,
were.
dirty word. I'm going to have to strike that from the record, sir.
We're
You
gonna
know
put a
we are
beep,
a live
Now,
first
okay,
beep.
steps company
just
here.
in my defense, definitely there was no live footsteps. And while you guys have absolutely perfected and well beyond you
He's
don't do
sweating here,
anything but
guys.
live footsteps doesn't do anything but Pearl Jam. So if I have to track all of the shows I've ever been to, I still got to use setlist.fm. But and they got there first. So, but do I like live footsteps better? Of course I do. So yeah. And I will
That's the right
publicize.
answer.
So for all of those listening, if you haven't been to Live Footsteps yet, you have to go there. If you're a Pearl Jam fan at all and you want to know the most obscure statistics of your Pearl Jam listening history, go to Live Footsteps. It'll make you happy.
That's how you get in good with Dave right there. Dave Jan
Yeah.
Exactly.
footsteps.
It is
Exactly.
a must.
Exactly. I know how to kiss up to my hosts and everything. So, but no, like I was saying, I mean, this was you didn't really know what to expect. So to answer your question, Javier, I mean, we were just we were happy to be there. So whatever we got was going to be very good. Now, what we got was, as I look back at this might be, and I'm not kidding, and I've been to not quite 20 shows, I think I've been to 19 shows now. This might be my favorite set list ever. And in 1998, if you would have asked me to like write down the 15 songs you would want to hear, they probably nailed 13 or 14 of them. And as we'll talk about, just the start and the pace of this show was unlike any Pearl Jam show that I've been to since, as far as just the up tempo, the bangers, the ones that I kind of tend to gravitate towards as far as like the heavier songs. This show was full of them, and that's why it was such a fun show. All of us that I was at the show with, and it's crazy. I mean, you always kind of recollect like who exactly you were with the show with. In this case, I honestly can't. I have to go back to my buddies and everything. I know my friend Kyle was with. I think my friend Jared was with. I know my friend Justin, who I've gone to just about every Pearl Jam show with. He was on the floor because his buddy had 10 Club seats. As I mentioned, I wasn't in 10 Club yet. That changed the very next day. So I got home and like, I'm not sitting in the freaking back of the arena anymore. I'm going on the floor the next time they come around. So I'm signing up for 10 Club today. And I did. I literally mailed that in the next day. And I haven't left since. So my number being from 1998 is pretty good. I'm not as good as many, but decent nowadays at least. But sometimes good opener. I mean, and for us, it was just kind of like, this is what a Pearl Jam show is like. Awesome. This is great. This is fun. And then just blew the doors off right after that.
It's a pretty cool version of Sometimes too, because I really like when it gets kind of like creepy when Stone starts to get all those like kind of creepy noises in the back. But like you were saying, Kirk, it opens the door for so many good songs, and the pace doesn't slow down till at least I got shit, I think. Then it's kind of like when they take like they say something after corduroy, but it's a go, and there's no stopping, and in the band sounds just outstanding. They just sound tight, and just like that kind of raw version of the band that we were able to see in '98. Also, you were saying something about like Ed that I thought that it was very important to touch up on, and it's just the fact that the Eddie Vedder that we know now is a little different than the one that we knew in '98. Do you remember how was that relationship with the crowd that he was trying to establish that night?
I mean, it almost feels like he wasn't really trying to establish a relationship with the crowd. I mean, at least in comparison to what you hear nowadays. Of course, Ed is ever the showman now. He's really this generation's Bruce Springsteen and everything at this point. But back then, and it really hit hard listening back to this bootleg over the last few days, just how he wasn't that and not even close to that at that point in his career, where he was almost kind of brooding, almost just not necessarily ignoring, but just kind of this like he wanted to have this presence that he was not really into that sort of thing was almost the impression that I got. And you watch the videos of this concert are pretty rough, but you can see a little bit of that in the videos. And the bootleg, I mean, again, he doesn't really talk a lot at all. And when he does, it's not in a particularly complimentary way to the crowd, although there are a couple of times in when he does. We'll certainly talk about that as the show goes on too. But yeah, it's more of this kind of brooding yield era Eddie Vedder as opposed to really everything that happened as soon as 2 to 3 years after that.
I think one of the things that stands out is that when he talks in the encore, he says something along the lines of, "You guys shocked us. You guys shocked us here," because the whole entire time he's thinking Chicago, because hometown show, Chicago. So this was, I believe, the eighth show on this run that had probably, I would say, like 20 or so, maybe a little bit more. Probably because they hadn't gone there since Lollapalooza. it just wasn't on his mind at all. So when they come back from Chicago and they get through a Chicago show that I'm sure was on their minds from the beginning, and they're completely just kind of sideswiped by this, and the crowd is excellent. I think this is another just phenomenal crowd show that really comes through well on the bootleg. And I know that you mentioned the bootlegs not at the best quality, but it's enough where you're able to feel what that crowd is giving you. And I think the most telling sign to me is probably when All Those Yesterdays has that hiccup,
Mm-hmm.
and you just hear the crowd erupt, and they keep going and they keep going, and it's just showing their appreciation. And Ed doesn't expect that, and almost in a way, like back then, maybe didn't even want that, but you surprised him. Like, he came away from the show feeling pretty good about things, I think, and the crowd definitely gave him something that maybe like a crowd. And I know that they did a show in like South Dakota around this time, and maybe the South Dakota crowd probably didn't give him that at all. You know what I mean? He was pretty impressed.
I felt like it was a crowd that had 6 years of pent up energy and appreciation for the band to finally come and play a proper arena show and everything. And if you haven't listened to the bootleg, it is a good, what, 2.5 minutes of just nonstop raucous cheering while Stone's fumbling on stage trying to get the guitar fixed, and Eddie just kind of sitting there and just like smirk on his face, just at also, Stone struggling, the guitar tech struggling, but also just the fans and what they did. I mean, yeah, I'm trying to describe it. I mean, it's almost kind of 1991 era World Series in between innings crowd as far as just screaming at everything. It's hard to explain. I mean, and hard to explain like why it even happened. Minnesotans are weird. I mean, if you kind of come to our level when it comes to just self-deprecation, and it felt like everything they were doing at that moment kind of was. It's just like we're going to join in, we're going to appreciate that. It's just kind of in our nature, I think, to do that. And I think really just the fans showing their appreciation for the band and everything, that hey, you're not this perfect thing, and we really love that about you. It's a cool moment. It's definitely the moment of this entire concert. If you listen back to the boot, like it's the thing that stands out the most by far.
So, Kirk, some great stories that you had for us here. Excellent as always. And you mentioned it with joining the 10 Club the next day. Like, you were a fan for life, and that has not wavered since. I mean, outside of Minnesota, I believe you have the full Wrigley experience under your belt. You were at all 7 Wrigley shows so far, right?
A little bit, 6 out of 7. For
Oh, you
whatever
missed
reason.
one.
Yeah, I did. I did. Now I kind of, kick myself. Family reasons had to come back home, or it just, it became a weekend that just was not conducive to me staying. That was the 2018 show. So I went to one of those two, the first one. But yeah, I've seen them in Alpine Valley 3 times and then ventured out a little bit more. We saw them at Ohana Encore, one of those two shows, and then Bourbon and Beyond in Louisville, too, where you and I met for the first time, Randy, finally.
True. Yeah.
So, pretty much though, staying in the Midwest, Minnesota, Milwaukee, and Chicago. And it stems back to this show. Like I said, I left there that night and said, I don't want to have to wait in line at Mervin's of California anymore to get tickets. I want to get tickets right from the band like my buddy did. So signed up for the 10 Club the next day. Every time I get a chance, we'll go. It all stems back to that show and just the energy that the crowd had. Comment that Eddie made, of during that All Those Yesterdays. I think, like you mentioned, he said later on, like, you guys really surprised us. And then during that, several minutes or however long it was, where it's just nonstop cheering as you're literally trying to fix something on stage. Eddie made the comment of, I can't wait to see this building when you guys finally make the finals. As a Timberwolves fan and now season ticket holder, I can tell you we haven't made the finals yet, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, that's a building that does get pretty loud when the team is playing well. Historically, we haven't had many of those seasons, but it also just really the energy that we had that night was incredible. And it's the thing that when you're there and you experience it for the first time, you never want to go back, or you never want to go back to a day where you didn't go to those shows. Is what I'm trying to say.
Was the last time a Minnesota team in the finals the North Stars against the Penguins? Was that the last time?
Man, you're really twisting the needle here, aren't you? It was the
The
'91
the
World
team that
Series.
doesn't
It was perhaps the
Oh,
greatest World Series of all time, 1991 against the Braves, but in the 34 seasons since, not only have we not won a championship, and this is just the men's teams, the Lynx freaking rock, even though they also got screwed over this year, and don't get me started on that, but our men's teams have not been back to a championship game or series in those four major sports since the Twins won the World Series in 91. We haven't won a conference or league championship, not even like the world championship, the conference or league championship. So we are a tortured and grumpy sports fan base. And that's why we need bands like Pearl Jam to come and visit us more often because, and I've said this to friends lately in the wake of our latest Minnesota sports team losing, the Vikings, you never go home angry after a concert.
it's very true. 100%. I mean, the Gophers had to have won some Frozen Fours, right?
Well, last one of those is 2003. And let's be honest here, that's a sport we're supposed to freaking win.
Right.
Like, and we haven't even done that in 21 years. Now, other Minnesota teams have. Duluth's won a few, but if you grew up in the Twin Cities, the Gophers are your hockey team for the most part. So, shout out to the Duluth team, of course, because they've done us proud. But yeah, even the Gophers hockey team has not won in 21 years, and that is pretty stunning.
Well, Kirk, successful professional sports teams or not, we're very happy that you can come on and share all those stories. It was great talking to you again. And boy, just watching the Vikings is just painful. And I'm sorry. As somebody that roots for a team that is also has a ton of, like most of my teams do have just tons of pain, but football
Mhm.
especially with the Bills. And I hope by this point I'm talking as a fan of a team that's going to the AFC Championship game. I
Mhm.
don't know as we stand right now, as this is being recorded on Friday, but yeah, watching the Vikings is rather. Ooh,
Well, I'll
that's
tell you,
painful.
we are kindred spirits in that regard. If you look at
Both
any
have
of
four Super
the
Bowl losses.
correct, we're the 2-0-4s, and if you look at any of the polls that have been out on any of the Vikings forums, now it's like, well, now who are you rooting for? The Bills are the overwhelming favorite. I'm cheering for the Bills on your behalf and for all those others as well, and probably because I just think it's fitting that we would be the only 0-4 team after that. So yeah, we kind of want that title back to ourselves. Actually, we really don't, but it probably is fitting if we had it. So, but no, thanks again. Really appreciate getting a chance to talk to you guys and everything.
Absolutely. Anytime, man. This might not even be the last Minnesota show we do this year.
Awesome. Hey, you know who to call.
All right. Well, look, we're not done with the stories because, again, Kirk is just Mr. Minnesota. He's gotten his request through Patreon before we've done his episodes. Now we get to tell the story of Nate. I think he goes by Nate Pencils, is like what he likes to call himself. So we can call him Nate Pencils here. He sent us a nice little story, and we're going to share it for you here before we dive into the set list. I'm a Pearl Jam fan from the start. At age 13, 10 came out, and that was that. Pearl Jam was my band. But it wasn't until June 30th, 1998, where I can attend my first show. That's the theme today, right? I grew up in northern Minnesota in a town of 9,000 people, about 4 hours north of Minneapolis. At that time, we got tickets by waiting in line at the local Hallmark store. I love these stories, guys. Keep them coming. Who, for whatever reason, was the only local distributor for Ticketmaster. The ambiance of get well cards and floral arrangements really got me and my three friends hyped for this show. We picked our seats by pointing at a paper printout of the Target Center seat chart, center stage back in the mid lower bowl. Not bad. I made the trip to Minneapolis before for other punk rock shows. Those trips usually involve a few pops along the way, for those not driving. But this was a trip where I choose to be stone sober. I wanted to remember this show. We got to our seats with Frank Black and the Catholics already into their set. And my one big worry going into the show was Pearl Jam's new drummer. I was a big Jack Irons fan. Though I was also a fan of Matt Cameron's drumming during Soundgarden, I felt a little worried about the fit. Early on, I remember thinking, this isn't really how Jack plays it. But man, did Matt really smash those drums. He won me over not too much later on in the set. We got a killer first 5 songs before Even Flow, some deeper cuts later, and even got one from Stone Gossard. But they did leave out one song to not close the show. The crowd was psyched for the band, and I remember Ed saying something to that effect, something I later confirmed while watching the show on YouTube. I left feeling like it was an excellent Pearl Jam show. The Yield Tour was a great era in PJ history, and I'm happy as hell that I got to see them. Excellent. Thanks so much, Nate. Great story. And I love kind of comparing the two that we just heard right there. So, yeah, great stuff. And look, I think he brings up a really good point about Cameron before we really dive into the set list. There are some things where I noticed in this set that's like, okay, Cameron very early on definitely had this song down. And then maybe there was another song or two where it's like, okay, he needs a little bit of fleshing out on this song, but he almost has it. So when we get into those parts of the set, we'll talk about that. And, 1998, I mean, this is probably his like 8th or 10th show or something like that. So it's still very, very early on. But I mean, he's a very adaptable drummer and he pretty much gets this. So dig into the set, shall we?
Let's do this.
Okay. As we talked about, the opener of this show and the first song that Kirk and Nate ever saw live was Sometimes.
Those fingers pushing back. You're a guy and you got hands. The colors blend. The challenges you give seek my point.
You mentioned something about Sometimes that was actually the same thing that I wanted to talk about. And that is the little pieces of noise that Stone creates, like right before digging into the chorus, right before the Seek My Part. On the record, it feels like kind of a wave crashing a little bit, but live kind of feels like you're almost hitting like a piece of sheet metal or something like that. Explain what's going on there.
Yeah, like the creepy noises, right?
Yeah,
he's just like wobbling something around. I thought at the beginning that he was just like getting close to his amp and kind of like moving the amp so you can kind of like shake the tubes so you can get that kind of noise. But he's just crackling the cable and you get like kind of like added to the echo and the delay that he puts in the back. And I think you have that sometimes with that sound, that it will create a different atmosphere. And then you will have the sometimes without the sound that maybe is going to drive the song in a different way. But it's always fun just to listen to this kind of version because it's just, I don't know, man, it makes the song very, very dark. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but it's just, I think it pushes the song towards a different direction, which I think for this set works perfectly fine because it kind of like opens the path for everything that is coming next.
Yeah, I think Sometimes definitely has a couple of different identities, and one of them is exactly what you said. Like it is a little bit dark, the slower build, and then one of the other identities that I think I like the most out of Sometimes, which they almost toy with here, is that at the end they really start to rev up and make it big, and they start to kind of get big. And when you're going from Sometimes to a song like Last Exit, I love how they're getting ready to pump into the set, and that's a good little transition. They don't quite fully engage on that part in this, but I like the little tease nonetheless.
Yeah, totally agree. Like you said, it's the perfect transition for what's coming next. And what we're going to get now is just like a very good indication of what the end of Sometimes was and what they were preparing us for.
So the preparation here is for a bunch of bangers. And as we talked about, Last Exit, Brain and J, and Hail Hail. I do think that Last Exit is something we got to bring up here. While Last Exit is always a great number 2 to really hammer home what the set's going to be, I did notice going to the Cameron storyline here is that it doesn't quite have the same thump that we know it to have in this version. It's a little bit slower because of that. Obviously, Jack perfected it during his time with Pearl. Like, immediately, Last Exit was Jack's song when he came in. And it's hard when you're first coming in, because Last Exit wasn't the song they were playing every single night, maybe every other night possibly, but Cameron didn't quite find that thump that Jack had with this from the beginning. He's gonna get there, very clearly gonna get there, but this one, I don't think quite reached that mark.
Something that I noticed about this show too about Matt is, like we were saying before, there are certain songs that he finds his own place and he just nails it. But I think the issue that Matt had around this time is, historically Matt Cameron always been like a big hitter. Like in every single interview from engineers, from people who work with him in several projects, or even Pearl Jam itself, it's how can you keep up with them? And I think Matt in certain songs abuses that, like hits the drum kit way too hard and doesn't give that room or space that Jack used to leave in certain songs. And I think that's why you can hear the difference in certain songs, specifically in Last Exit, because like you said, you're missing that thumb, you're missing that rhythm that Jack, he made the song his own, and you're missing a key element that is so unique to the intro that if you're a longtime fan, or maybe if you're a new fan, if you listen to the song live, you're going to be like, this is good, but I'm missing a thing, you know?
Yeah, and I think there were other spots, not just within the intro, but just within that song, that like little fills in moments where you're not expecting the fills to be. I don't know if it was just off-timed a little bit, or if he was just trying to assimilate to his own style or what, but it was just like a little bit off from what he would get to later with the song. But always good to have it under your belt and kind of understand where they had it at the time and where it would end up being, because obviously Cameron has been destroying Last Exit for the last 25 years, so no issue there. Brandon J is the highlight for me. I mean, surprise, surprise, right? But this section especially, I thought Brandon J was just absolutely on fire. It was definitely more practiced, obviously being a brand new song off the record that they were playing every single night. So Cameron had it down really, really well. But I think it's Stone in this, that Stone is absolutely nailing his solo, flashy solo too, and it has that identity of the rawness of 1998. Loved 1998 for Ed's voice, because he has a perfect dichotomy of the way that he can growl and the way that he can transition into singing pristinely from there. I think he does that better here than any other era.
Thank you for saying that, because that's something that I was going to say too, because for me, one of the key elements of the 98 sound is, okay, you have a band that they have reached something that is pretty unique with Yield, but there's no way that you can ignore what they have done in the past. And I think this year like expresses perfectly that balance in between both eras, if you want to call it that way. And the ability that Ed has to growl and add so much intensity, but also going back to something maybe a little bit more softer, or maybe something that is going to add more melody to it. It's outstanding. And the band itself is the same. It's just, if you listen to any shows of 98, the band doesn't sound extremely heavy. It's just like that perfect mix of elements that it makes every song sound in the way that it should sound by 1998. There's nothing extra, there's nothing less, or there's nothing missing. It's just the perfect mix, for me at least.
Balance is essentially what you're saying there.
Yep. Balance. Like it's like the yin and yang. They found whatever they were looking for, and they just express it artistically and sonically in a perfect way. Yeah, it's a very good example.
Hail Hail finishing off that section was excellent as well. Jeff is in ready stance during this, and his parts are just vibrant. I mean, he's always the standout on this song, but something's happening. I think the crowd just erupts at one point. Ed's back is to the stage. I didn't see if there was a specific thing that made him go off, but they just decided within the fourth song, we're just going to go off now. And I think that kind of pumped a little bit of extra energy into the end of it, because Ed holds out that last line for what felt like eternity until they finished off the song. Very, very strong finish on Hail Hail for sure.
Going back to what Kirk said too, like how excited the crowd was. Imagine that the crowd just erupted just because he turned towards the back during Hail Hail. That's why the crowd got so like excited. It's just they were responding to every single thing that the band was giving to them. Like it was interaction in between a band member and the audience, or maybe Stone smiling or Mike pointing out. It's just the crowd was eager to interact with the band in any sort of way via the song, or maybe there was something that they were doing in between a band member and a part of the crowd. It's very exciting to see crowds like this when they're so responsive to what the band is giving to them.
And Ed responds to that right away. He says, thanks a lot. Glad you can make it. Glad we can make it. This is typical Ed for this time. Glad the whole fucking world has made it thus far, but we'll see what happens. Just radiating positivity out there. But that leads way to Faithful and Even flow back to back here. You mentioned something about Faithful. I can't remember if it was with talking with Kirk or beforehand, but you really enjoyed this version, and I was just thinking the whole time, they're locked in. Like the bridge, I think, is really where the song elevated, and they really kind of stepped on the gas a little bit. But what about this version of Faithful did you think made it work so well?
Yeah, the band is just in the pocket. I don't think that you can really find a bad version of Faithful in 98. This version for me is a little extra, has a little bit more juice to it, because how the band is so tied up and locked in, especially in that and it's just the intensity they add to that part without the need of adding extra elements or extra pedals or extra overdrive. It's just the interaction in between every single one of the elements that the band is giving to the song that it makes it sound so good, in my opinion at least. For me, this is definitely one of the highlights of the show. It just gives you something extra, and I'm glad that we're covering this show too, because I forgot how good Faithful was in 1998.
That, I mean, the last couple of years it's been very hit and miss. I mean, it's definitely down tuned, now, so it doesn't have that original feel to it like it has back then. But yes, when you hear it from 1998, it does bring you back. It does get you transfixed for sure. Look, they're on a roll. They're on a roll at this point in the set, and when you get to Even Flow, a song that you've heard over 900 times live overall, you can kind of get a little jaded on it, and it's just kind of like, all right, well, let's wait for the solo. But I thought that just listening to the entire song, it just felt good. Something about it just popped. And is that different than any other version? I don't know. I don't know if I can completely explain that, but if anything, I think it just felt effortless.
Yeah, agreed. It's hard to describe what it is, but maybe if we look at the technicality of the thing, maybe we can find an explanation. But I think it was before 2003, even in the binaural time, they usually skip one of the cymbals on the and that enhances that break in that part. This has that. And also I think the EQ that the band was using makes it a little bit more bluesy, and Stone is like prime Stone Gossard, prime Groove Master. All those elements, I think they add a very unique combination that the song sounds right. It doesn't need any extra sauces or anything like that. The song sounds right, and it's funny, and it's very interesting to see how Mike gets over the solo, because it's kind of like you're looking at a very naive version of Mike McCready in 98. It's still not the very flashy player that you will have the spot for certain songs for him. It's kind of like he's still experiencing, and he's still experimenting with certain things that he's not very sure that they're going to work. And he's kind of like, well, maybe this will work, maybe this doesn't work. But you kind of see like the genesis of the player, that what he is now.
I fully agree with that. I mean, the little things. I thought that this was a pretty flashy solo, especially compared to what he was going through in 1998. Not his prime year. I think 2003 is really his big breakout, but little things like just closing his eyes and looking up to the heavens, that sort of thing, that shows you that he's feeling something. Because that was, I guess, one of the things about McCready pretty early on in the 90s is that, like, he would play, but he wouldn't show the kind of emotion that he shows now. Now he revels in the spotlight. Like, that's no problem for him. It's natural for him, but he was just starting to get to that point. And Even Flow being like one of those songs where you can easily do that because the spotlight is directly on him. But now, I mean, he gets like 5 or 6 of those moments a night. So yes, it is definitely the evolution of what is to come to the Mike McCready. Ed throws on the guitar for the first time here. He dedicates the song coming up next, which is Corduroy, to Frank Black. He said it was going to be the last show that he and the Catholics play on tour with them for a while. We can talk about him and everyone in his band for a very long time, but we're just going to play the music. I'm very aware that I'm standing in the same spot as Charles was before, Charles being the real name of Black Francis. The significance is not lost on me, so I take it very seriously when I start this next song. Corduroy is going to go into I Got Shit and then Pilot. I love, again, going back to that point on Brain of J, when it just changes up the raspy, gruntled growl to like a normal singing voice. It's just so effortlessly. He perfected that. And the vocals here going into the bridge on the Everything Has Changed, like that was pristine. I thought his vocals sounded phenomenal on Corduroy. Just soaring through the arena, I thought.
Yeah, you can hear in the crowd too. The crowd gets excited about the song, and it's one of those versions also that, like you said, like his voice is so pristine. It complements the song so well that nothing else needs to be added, which I think is kind of like the common point that like the balance that the band found around this time. It was just like perfect. Balance needs to be perfect sometimes to work. In this case, they found something that it makes them unique, and maybe there's something that like they found that they helped them to move on with different things about in the way that they were writing songs, or even in the way that Ed was managing himself as a singer too. Maybe he found something that not necessarily that he felt that he needed to growl all the time or to be a melodic singer all the time. Maybe he found himself later on just to be the singer that he is right now.
I got She's very good here. I think Cameron is really kind of getting into his element. There are little embellishes that give this song a lot of force, and you can tell that Jeff is kind of feeling it too because he starts like marching right in front of Matt towards the end of the song. But I think a talking point we should get to is Pilot here because they did not make a whole lot of attempts on Pilot just yet. Obviously, this has been played less than 40 times overall, and this was only the fifth time that they've attempted through the times that they were on tour with Jack in Australia, going up to, at this point, sort of in the early stage of the first leg here. So Pilot was not really brought to the fold, and there's some interesting things about it. I think like you kind of had some good things that you wanted to bring up, and it's not a bad performance, but I like it when Ed goes for it. And I think that in this era, he shouldn't have had to feel like he needed to reserve himself. Because I think he, on the choruses, he doesn't quite get to that extra level of elevating his voice. And it hurts a little bit because that's a great backing vocal on the end of that too. The obeys, listens, kisses, loves. And you lose a little bit of the personality when that's not there. He adds it in like one time towards the end, but I feel like you need that in the song for it to feel like the song. And it's kind of an every other version sort of thing that it's brought up. But this obviously isn't one that they've always felt super comfortable with, and maybe I don't know the full reason for it. Maybe this could be one of those songs that you cover on the next Gear Garage, as we've talked about. Like, this could be a really good one, because not a lot of people think about Pilot when you put Yield together. But what'd you think about this one?
Well, by the way, that's definitely on my list for the next episode. Yeah, so, I mean, allow me to go back a few years. When I was trying to figure out the song in the guitar many years ago, I've always thought that it was a very unique song for this band because it feels like a quiet song. In a live setting, you expect that this band is going to be loud, and I think the challenge sits on the fact that this is a song that it's quiet for what they're used to be playing around that time. Like you said, at the end, you need that voice to shine, and the song loses something at the end by not having that. Because you're like, go for it, and I say, he didn't do it. It's kind of like you waste all the backing vocals at the end just because Ed decided not to go for it, and I think that's what it's missing, because it's an element that like the song needs to have that perfect ending, and I feel that this didn't have that.
The finality is what it needs. Like, it needs the familiarity. You know, there's some things and pieces of songs, and nothing else similar to this is coming to mind, but there are little things out there that like you at home would sing these little parts on the album that sometimes they don't bring to the live stage. And it's disappointing because it is part of the song and you want to keep the parts of the song together. Honestly, like, Jeff could have done the dog part, you know? Like, that could have been Jeff. It's a Jeff song, so why not? But I guess maybe that's a reason why they never considered it further into their catalog, is because that it just didn't feel like they can put the vocals together in the right spots. But look, I like the song, I think, more than I let on, because I mean, it's off my favorite record for one, and it's just a glue song. You know, it puts the album together, and like it kind of has a cool little juxtaposition of sort of an easygoing start to more of a wild in between, and comes together and puts a nice little bow at the end of that. Like, it's a good song. I don't think it gets enough credit in their catalog for sure. So, look, they go through a lot of songs here, just back to back to back to back, which is pretty normal for that time where they don't stop and talk. So, we're just going to do the same thing. It's going to be Daughter, MFC, Lucan, then Wish List. Impressed by Daughter here. I think it had some life to it, but, shades go down, tag goes up, as we know. I liked the Noise of Carpet tag by Stereolab. I thought that was a nice little touch and maybe a little shorter than some of the other times that they've tagged the song. It is one of my favorite ones of the 90s, so I do like when it pops up. But also, what's coming along in this tag, he's doing some vocal harmonies right after. And when reading the review on this on Five Horizons, it says that it's reminiscent to what he did when he was recording with Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and I won't argue against that. I mean, it comes off as incredibly passionate, and he almost like lets it out in a roar. So, yeah, it's a cool little thing. It's not very often that he would just kind of do some vocal harmonizations at the end there and just kind of go off. Put the guitar back on for MFC and Luke. And what I noticed here, and look, it's still very early on, but Ed doesn't have a whole lot of guitar changes in the 90s. Like, he's using a different guitar that he was using for Corduroy, and I Got Shit. And he's pulling out a Rickenbacker here. So this feels rather rare at the time. Again, MFC's a new song, so new identity, but he wasn't using a lot of different guitars at this time. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. We got the SG, we got the Schecter. They ended up showing up later in their eras, but the Ricky is a pretty nice choice, I will say, especially because you won't associate MFC with that kind of guitar because Rickenbackers are very spanky and they're gonna add a little bit more spark to it. So I thought that it was a pretty cool choice. And as a guitar head, when I saw that, I'm like, ooh, all the spidey senses went up because it's kind of like you don't see that very often. And I think it added something very unique to the song. And I like it. I think that that's something that I would like to see again. And maybe someday it's going to happen again.
Yeah, he's been known to break it out every now and again. And there's some other songs that later I think it's kind of worked on, and they're not coming to my mind right now. Of course, at the time that I need to remember them, but
That's
it's
how it works.
I know. Well, you just kind of take the punches and roll with them. But it's not common, but it will happen time and time again where they'll bust it out. It looks like it's about like twice his size, but you know, he
It's
deals
like
with it.
that blue Dan Electro that we covered a few shows ago. Remember that it
Right.
showed up like in a very specific time, and
Hmm.
we were both like wondering about like why didn't it show up again.
Right. As he's told before, goes into his studio with all the barking guitars saying, pick me, pick me, pick me. And you just can't pick all of them. And, usually in that case, he's just going to take the Tom Petty red Fender anyway. So
Yeah,
Lucan, I think, interesting because they hang on to it for a little bit at the end. Like, it's not like a stop on a dime. It's kind of like a wow. Like, they have more of a rock and roll ending to it, which is interesting. But certainly interesting transition into Wish List. The two songs don't really necessarily meet up every now and again at a show. It's usually like looking into something a little more heavier than Lucan, like a Porch or a Not For You or something like that. But Wish List is interesting to note here. The crowd, there's a moment where the 15 million hands upraised, they start to just go off, and you hear the crowd again. The crowd's going to be a story in a moment here with all those yesterdays, but Ed kind of notices that. He's like, yeah, that's good. That's good. And you can see the mirror ball goes off after that. And everybody's, I mean, this was the single for them at the time. So, this song was in heavy rotation. But something that happens on this song in 1998 is that they kind of have this like pop back reprise at the end, instead of kind of going off and doing the Ebo for a while, it's cool. I love when they bring it back. I mean, it was basically just for this era, but it's not often that we get to cover where they just kind of just jump right back into the song and do like a final stanza and that's it. It says, this guy right over here has a sign. So this one is for you, fucker. And his sign apparently says, Stone, Stone, Stone. So Stone says, oh no, I couldn't. I'm going to sing one. Carrie, can you hear this shit? Neither can I. Turn it up. And Stone is going to be the topic of conversation for the next two songs because it's Mankind and it's all those yesterdays. Mankind is fun. And I don't have too much on it, but like this is the era before they really started to severely screw it up. And that would come in 2003 where, yeah, it was not the same, but it was a good performance. I had a lot of fun with it, but I think the story here is definitely all those yesterdays. So as mentioned with Pilot, Yesterdays is another one off Yield that did not really get to the same standing as Given a Fly and Brandon J and Evolution Wishlist. And I suppose that if you're listening to this version, there's a reason for that. This is only the third time they've ever played it. So the intro gets plucked by Stone. And by the time that Ed comes in, which was a little bit late, a little bit off key, Stone's guitar just stops.
Don't you think you are rare? Apparently, yes.
Sorry. Now we're just sitting there and killing time until Stone gets things fixed. And sometimes you can find a crowd that can find themselves restless and maybe kind of throw stuff on stage for some crowds. I don't know, maybe not with Pearl Jam, but like with other crowds, they can get a little bit, like, okay, play the rock and roll. We're tired of this. Instead, the Minnesota crowd is like, we love it. Yes, more of this. We're happy. We're in such a good mood. Thank you for coming. And Ed is just in shock. He says, this is unbelievable. We ought to fuck up like that more often.
The biggest shout for this is just Stone's guitar tech. Because the guy in less than 2 minutes or 3 minutes, because of course that I'm paying attention to everything that he's doing. He goes through the power sources, he goes through cables, he goes through the amps. Because it has happened to me in the past where like the amp goes down and you don't know what's going on. Because Stone's started to play the song and you can hear just a crackle. And you're like, what the heck? Is the guitar going down? Like, what is it? And he ended up fixing the problem. And I think it was like a cable thing that was on the pedal board because once he replaced a few cables, everything was like back on track. But I think you got to have such a dedication and spirit and also speed because like how many people are waiting for you just to get it going quickly? 15,000, 60,000? Well, shout out to Stone Stick that I still cannot remember his name and he has been with him forever. I need to find that. But amazing moment, and you see like how the crowd is so engaged, even though they, like you said, they kind of screwed up. Something went down with their gear and like they just having it. And it's cool to see that Ed is kind of like letting himself go a little bit and enjoying that moment with the crowd and not just to be that kind of character that he was in 98.
Yeah, I mean, he makes that comment that Kirk said before about, oh, wait until you guys get into the finals. I'm still waiting, but, with A-Rod as the owner of that team, I mean, he's known to go to championships, right?
Yeah, I hope so.
Are you a Timberwolves fan?
No, but I know some people that they are, and I know that it's a life of suffering. So for what I've heard, but we'll see.
I mean, it's a life of suffering if you're anything but a Chiefs or a Dodger fan at this point. So
True.
Oh,
That is
fuck
very
the
true.
Dodgers. I'm in total fuck that franchise mode.
And the Chiefs.
Oh, I mean, that's obvious. I mean, we could be sitting here right now, as mentioned before, with the Bills, Chiefs, and Bills might be showing up again in the playoffs. So, well, just beat them. Whatever. We beat them already this year, so it's all good. The version, once they get into the song, I would say that not fully fleshed out. It kind of does sound like if they were to sound check it, this sounds like a sound check version. They're still figuring out as they go. And this is one of my favorite songs off of Yield. I love this song. And I think it just found its way later in life. And once you get into like the 2010s, All Those Yesterdays becomes that song that it's like, yeah, it's a rare song, it's popping up and it almost never pops up, but it will from time and time again, and it sounds terrific. It feels like they put something back together on that. And something that I noticed too is that towards the end, Stone always used to solo on this, but you might not know this, Mike solos on the end of All Those Yesterdays now, not Stone.
Okay, I didn't know that.
The Toronto version's a little bit different because it's acoustic, but Mike does the solo on that. But there are other versions that have happened more recently where Mike is the guy, which I never even knew. Because it's a Stone song. You just assume.
Right. And the song kind of needs Stone at the end, in my opinion.
I fully agree with that. Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
the sound. That's dictating the progression of the song for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we got Black and Alive that are going to end your main set here. And although Mike is not soloing on this version of All Those Yesterdays, he is very obviously the standout in Black. I mean, you go back to kind of the mode that Mike got into in Even Flow. I think you're right back to that. The electricity in this place starts to flicker, and the place kind of came unglued once Mike started to rip into that. And yeah, this was really kind of juicing up all that anticipation and momentum that would end up transferring to Alive. I thought that these two were a phenomenal way to close the set. And Black was not extended at all. The solo went off a little bit, but it definitely didn't have the same kind of call and response feel that it does now. But I thought that energy-wise, they absolutely nailed it. And Alive also just nailed.
Yeah, the fan running into the stage had a really good time too, by the way. And I love the fact that it was just like, be gentle, you know? I mean, everybody's getting excited. My favorite thing about Black is just how the band looks at Mike. For me, that was like, this is freaking awesome, because you can tell that they're looking at him and it's like, wow, what this guy is playing and channeling right now, this is really cool. It's kind of like little kids watching your hero. Like, well, when I was a little kid watching him, one of my guitar heroes too. But it's very fun to see that. It's sometimes stuff that we maybe for fans we take for granted, and I bet that for them they have to be very, very proud to have that kind of player, especially when you get moments like that that you're like, I mean, look, like, that's our guy, and he's playing that song with us right now, you know?
Well, you know what the craziest thing about that is? About all what you just said? After all of these years, that has not changed.
Mm-hmm.
They still do that.
Yeah, that's our guy. Yeah.
Alive, again, very, very good. The fan obviously creates some humor for this for sure. But we get a War Pigs tag at the end of this. Mike is going behind the back and really digging into that a little bit. Ed's shrieking away. Just tons of life out there on that stage. And it just has a big end of set feel to it for sure. All right. At the encore, let's pause for station identification here and tell you guys that anytime you'd like to pitch in and donate to our show and help us with our funding, because well, we don't sell commercial ads on here. We also don't monetize, because if we monetize, I don't think we'd be able to do this show the way that we want to do it. So the way that we're able to earn a little bit here is to ask for donations, kind of like the same way that NPR or PBS does. You know, you guys listen to our content, you like our content. And if you like our content, we have more exclusive content over on a place where if you're willing enough to donate, then you can listen to all the exclusive content over there. And that's just kind of the deal, is that if you guys are into that exclusive content, we'll just keep making more and more and more. And that's kind of the plan for this year. As you guys over on Patreon right now have been paying attention to, the Gear Garage episode for the last version of the Deconstructing Dark Matter is out, so you'll want to listen to that for sure. I put up the first episode of Setlist Hangman in there as well. I think that part 2 is probably, if it's not out already, it'll be out very, very soon. So you'll want to check that out. Those are a lot of fun. We just have a blast doing it. If you want to play the game, get in touch too, because the game is just a lot of fun. It's just friends hanging out and having a good time and talking about the band, of course. But the way that you can donate is to go to patreon.com/live-on-4legs. And what you'll want to do is just take everything in and just check out what we got. And again, a lot of it is dependent on the collaboration here and the communication that we have with people. If you guys want more exclusive content, then we're going to give it to you this year. That's without a doubt. But we need to see that you want it. I'll just put it that way. We need to see that you want it, because I know a lot of people, you're all kind of signing up because you want to see what's happening in the reaction episodes. Those are going to be huge. And I know that you guys are going to want to anticipate that and all those episodes coming at some point soon. But there's tons of stuff over there. And also, guys, if you donate $5 or $10 a month, then you, just like Nate today, can get an episode of your choosing on this podcast. And guys, I was looking at the schedule earlier this week, and I will tell you that I think I've said this before, unlike every other year that we've done this podcast, I've put a lot of holes into this schedule where I don't know what we're going to be doing in a month from now. I want to see where this takes us. So if you have an idea, if you want to contribute, these holes are open and you can help us fill that. So please reach out. Let us know if you're a patron already and you're on the $5 or $10 tier. If you don't have a request in your name, reach out and we will get you on the list. And yeah, it's simple as that. Like, these are always the episodes that we love to get to, because I don't know if we were going to get to Minnesota 1998 without Nate. You know what I mean? So, and there's going to be an episode next week from an era that I probably would not have picked that show first, but somebody did. So you guys come first always. And if you guys are coming first, then we're just following your lead. We're telling your stories. So keep on supporting. And again, patreon.com/live-on-4legs, but also you can download the app and just search for Live on 4 Legs, or you can go to live-on-4legs.com if you choose and sign up that way. So lots of ways to do it, and we appreciate all the support. And again, more stuff going to come down the pikeway, we promise, but let's all be in it together. All right, back to the rock. We are going to not waste any time here. We're going to do 2 Yield songs out of the gate with Do the Evolution and Given to Fly right here. I love Stone's tone on his solo in Evolution back in 1998. It just, I don't know if it's a wah or what, but like, what is that sound? Because it's just tasty.
And I miss it too. It's something as simple as the use of a wah. So when Stone, it is a wah pedal, yeah, because he presses down, and whenever you press your wah pedal down, you get the high pitch over the pedal down, and then you get like kind of like closest when you lift your foot up. And I really like when he used to do that. Nowadays, he's just kind of like straight up, a little bit more volume and a little bit of boost. over the signal, and he will play it straight up. But it's cool because it adds something that I think as fans we miss. Something that I like about this version too, Randy, is have you noticed when Mike gets super intense when Stone is playing, the dynamic of the song changes, and this one he's kind of like more gentle in the way that he plays that D. So I think it makes the song a little darker too. So I thought that it was very interesting to hear that version too.
Interesting. No, I didn't notice that. That's interesting that you bring that up. I'm gonna have to, in the next 1998 show that we do, we're gonna have to listen closely to that for sure. But
Yeah,
I mean,
dig into it. You might like it.
I know I like it. I like Evolution. Why wouldn't I like it? I like McGrady, right?
Yeah,
So,
true.
I mean, something that I really do like, it's going back to the Given to Fly, patented groove. I mean, look, the song nowadays, it's great when it shows up, but I mean, identity, right? We've been talking the last couple of episodes about songs' identities and how they have characteristics. And the true characteristic for Given to Fly is the balance between the blossoming guitar and build from the verses to the absolute raucous choruses. They play it very fast now, and you lose a little bit of that mystique, but I don't hold that against the song now. I just hold the song in such high regard for this era because it was just at its peak when they wanted to do it right.
Yeah, and it's not too over distorted. It, like you said, it has everything right, and it's perfectly balanced. And I miss the MXR 90 at the intro too. Like I miss that. I think it adds so much to the song that it just puts the version on a different level. But I miss that. Maybe someday we'll get it back. Who knows?
I don't know. I mean, after 500 something versions of Given to Fly, it feels like they've been very kind of stuck in that. But look, never say never, right? I gotta keep saying that. Never say never.
With them, you never know. We always theorize about stuff, and then like boom, they open with a song that we thought that we were never gonna use. So yeah,
Facts. Just facts. And real quick on Cameron on this, I thought Cameron did phenomenal. I know it's a Jack song. I know that it is a patented Jack song, but I thought Cameron really kind of fit in with the ebbs and flows of this version. So Ed says, I'm so happy. Not because of you guys, but that's quite a reason. We didn't expect this. We kind of forgot what it was like up here. You kind of shocked us. We played Chicago last night, and I was thinking the whole tour, Chicago, Chicago, Chicago. And then that was done with, and we didn't expect this. You made a mark, but the other reason we have to be happy is that I was listening to the words of that last song, and I realized that there's at least one song that this band has that has a happy ending. Goodness, how wonderful. This little story is a true one, and it is the B-side to this last song. You get a duo of man, the duality of man, with Leather and Better, and then Leaving Here following up on those. I think, to me, for this little section here, I think the standout is probably Better Man, because you have another moment where you fuck up and the crowd picks you back up.
That's good, but see, that's the second verse, you see. I got you going. Gotcha. I got myself. Waiting, watching the clockers, 4 clockers, got to stop, tell me.
Ed did this at my first ever show too. It's a really funny moment. He is a lot of fun with them before he kind of starts over and gets into real Better Man. But Better Man in 1998, this is starting to really be a showstopper in waiting. I don't know if it's the full-on showstopper yet, but I mean, the crowd wants to see it, and they go for a song like this.
and it matches with everything that we have been talking to. That there are certain things that they started to become something more, and I think B-Man is not there yet, but like you said, eventually it's going to become that showstopper that everybody knows. and everybody likes so much because it's one of the fan favorites, and people will travel distances sometimes just to hear that song.
And you have to also, the simplicity of it being a version that doesn't have any tags at all, that you can just kind of play it and enjoy kind of a little bit of a jam at the end, but not dig into a whole chorus of call and response and don't runaways and stuff like that. There's something to be said for that because we just don't see it anymore. So I like that it was a truer version of this song before the tag aspect really exploded with it. Leaving Here we covered last week, so we're back to Leaving Here again too. It's a fun version, and I think the solos on here go Stone Stone Ed Mike, I believe. And it's just another way that you can kind of say they're having fun at the show. And it's great because what's going to happen next is a true tie-in with The Who. And obviously Leaving Here being not an original Who song, but a song that was popularized by The Who. And that tie-in that they have with My Generation that's going to come next. But it's just kind of a cool way to lay everything out.
For me, this is the showstopper.
Really?
Oh yeah. Like, you're probably gonna think like this. They're crazy. But My Generation Blues version, come on. And especially like you have that it makes it extremely unique. And then you have that tie-in with Porch. For me, that was like, okay, here we go. That really blew me away. It's been a very long time that I've heard something like this. And for me, this is a showstopper. I'm giving you a clue of maybe it's going to be one of my 3 favorite moments, maybe.
Well, see, I actually thought that you were alluding to Leaving Here being one of your showstoppers. So you tricked me a little bit. But no, I agree with that. I agree with the My Generation Blues. And you have to think, so My Generation Blues was just like something that The Who in the mid 70s just kind of made like a little bit of a change up to a song that they played forever and almost deconstructed it a little bit. This is exactly where you get the idea for the Porch, and you can call it slow Porch, you can call it Porch Blues, you can call it riffy Porch, but the Porch that came through from about like 2005 through 2018 or so, because they kind of stopped doing it this way now, and it's kind of closer to fast Porch than it was. But the riffy, if you remember that, ding, 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 that is a direct descendant of what My Generation Blues was with The Who. And you can see it here too. Like, they go off for about a minute or two doing My Generation Blues, and obviously it's a little bit slower, but it's a little jammier, and it's fun. And like the crowd is having fun with it. They're clapping along, and it's just something very, very cool that they brought to the table here. But when they are about to make the transition into Porch and they slow Porch down and it doesn't like hit you in the face with the what the fuck is this world, it continues to groove on that blues aspect right before when the song is about to explode.
I hope I die before they get old. This is my generation. This is my generation, baby. What the fuck is this thing? Running to you, leave a message, please find. Cuddle like your voice one last time. Barely not feeling this good. Be my time by you. Would you hit me? Would you hit me?
This, I believe, is the first time that we have a performance of Porch that does anything like this from recollection. And like I mentioned, it would be more popularized once Ed really started to do this on acoustic. And when he was doing that, he was doing like the pre-show stuff, Porch acoustic in 2005, 2006. And that kind of evolved into where they would do a little bit of that once they were doing regular versions of Porch in their set, and then it became the thing. They always did that instead of Fast Porch. I mean, that was a huge talking point for this podcast very, very early on in this podcast was Fast Porch versus Slow Porch and how much we love Fast Porch, which we still do. But the evolution and development into how it became this is just fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was saying before, I like the transition, but I think when you listen to this kind of version, it's sometimes we get so soaked in like new versions and trying to listen to every single booth that we can, and sometimes we forget about the beauty of certain things that they seem so simple. And when I listened to this show, that brought me back, and I'm like, I forgot that at some point they had this kind of Porch going on. And it's kind of like rediscovering a song that you have listened to so many times. It's kind of like you fell in love again with it just because you are listening from a different perspective. And I like that. It's not very flashy or anything like that. It's cool. It's really, really, really fitting with whatever they were doing in 98. And that aspect of going back, if we had a central theme for this show, it's just like the balance for everything that we're doing around this time, you know?
Yeah, I can't agree with that anymore. And Porch, this was actually the first time that they played it on this leg, so it felt like maybe they were waiting for a moment like this. But also, thing to keep note on here is that usually when Ed plays the intro nowadays, he would drop the guitar after he played that intro, and then he would do whatever going into the crowd, whatever stunts he wanted to do. But in this, he doesn't drop the guitar at all. He plays it the entire time. During the solo, he's using the EBow. During the chorus, he's back in on it. And I can't remember a version where I've seen him on guitar for the whole entire thing. Like, that's completely unique to it. And that's not counting acoustic versions or anything like that. But I thought that was really unique with this version of the song. And just a lot of cool stuff going on. You know, the Porch solo sounds great in this, and it's not only a noteworthy way to finish things up, it's a spectacular way to finish things up. So that is that. That is the show right there. Minneapolis 1998. So now we get into the decider factor here and figuring out what moments that we want to bring to the table to say this is what made the show this show. So what do you got here?
My number 3 is going to be My Generation Blues. For me, that's the showstopper. Even though that there's 2 moments that for me, they're even more important. Number 2, all those yesterdays, because of how the crowd reacted and how electrified they were just to be in the arena waiting for the band to play in the state of Minnesota. And my number 1 is going to be Faithful.
Excellent, excellent. I think that it differentiates a little bit here. I am going to throw one of those moments in somewhere, but I think we're going to go number 3 is going to be Even Flow for this, because I love when I'm just able to sit back and enjoy it and not like wait for the moment to come. I'm going to go number 2. I'm going to say My Generation and Porch, because I think it's important within the history of the band for sure, and definitely a unique thing. There's always one thing or so when you look back at shows and be like, that's the show that had that. And I think that's this show's version of that. So that's pretty important in that discussion. But I think my number one moment is, yeah, no surprise to anybody. It's going to be Brandon J. I thought that this was an explosive version and just really ripped from the seams. All right, that gets us into a rating for this show. What are we going to do with this Minneapolis show?
It's a pretty good show. I enjoyed it a ton. It's been a while since I had like this fun, just like to kind of like find details and stuff like that. But I thought at some point that it was going to be part of the Hall of Fame. And I'm not going to lie. But then I'm
Not
like,
there.
well, yeah, for me, there were a few things that didn't, I don't want to say fit or sit right. But for me, I thought that this is a solid 9. And I was very content with that rating.
Yeah, I'm fairly close to that. I think it has a terrific crowd. I think the crowd comes through where in moments in 1998, maybe some crowds didn't. I think there's a show from Vancouver that famously Ed was like, "Come on, guys, what are you doing here?" And the crowd kind of had some dull moments. But this one, the crowd was super impressive, especially with times where they didn't have any business being. And that goes back to all those yesterdays. They could have rebelled against it if they wanted to, but they encouraged and they kept it up. And I think that's the difference between, what could have been like a lower rating for this is that the crowd was just on hand and did their role, and a lot of very good performances here. I think there are some songs that maybe I don't go back to from the show, like Last Exit obviously doesn't have that thump that I was talking about before. I think this version of Pilot maybe loses a little bit, but I mean, great versions of like Hail Hail and Brandon J. All those yesterdays is a lot of fun. Mankind's a lot of fun. Black and Alive are great. And obviously My Generation Blues and Porch are wonderful as well. So I'm going to give this an 8.5. Not bad ratings at all. I'm sure you Minnesota people, we have done you proud. And yeah, that is that for that show. I don't know when we'll be back to a 1998 show this year, but I'm sure we will. So keep that in mind. We'll let you know when we're there. But before we even get there, we have to talk about next week. Next week, we're doing another request because that's just sort of what we do at this time of year. We get all the requests in because we know that you guys, especially the ones that have requested it back last year, it's tough to crunch everything into one year. So we like to do it at the beginning and fulfill those before the tour comes around for sure. And I believe we are going to fulfill one for Aaron McCauley, and that would be Ottawa 2022 that we're going to do this week. So I'm excited for that because I really do love the 2022 tour, especially that leg was just fantastic. They had some great shows, and Ottawa has some really, really good moments for sure. That garden, I cannot wait to talk about that. That's going to be a highlight moment for sure. So check that out and tune in next week, and that's what you're going to get. But for anybody tuning in this week, we thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. And if you're brand new to this podcast and want to hear more, then please hit that subscribe button on any of the platforms that you choose to listen on. Podcast platforms could be Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you can listen to us on YouTube as well. And if you're there, you want to leave some comments, then please feel free. Leave some positive comments because I've seen like negative comments recently, and all I'll say about, I don't care if people are negative, but like, if you're just gonna trash us, what's the point, man? Like, just don't listen. If you don't like it, just don't listen. But if you got something to say, if you got something to share. We can have a conversation about things. I'm not gonna care if somebody's just shouting at us. But look, we're open to everything. But we appreciate the positive stuff. It puts us in good spirits for sure. So if you want to comment on any of the platforms, you can leave us a little comment. Let us know what you think about the episode or what you think about the show in general. And then you can always give us a 5-star rating if you feel like we deserve it. And we sit here, we do the work every week. So I can't say that we don't deserve it at all. So I'm not going to be humble about that for sure. So that can be done over on Apple, Spotify, wherever you can rate podcast, obviously. Okay, that's going to clear this one out. This may be the end. We're here, but not for much longer. And although we may be parting ways, miss you already, miss you always. I hope this ages well, but go Bills. Sorry, Vikings fans. But, we're in football mode right here and getting close to the Super Bowl. So hopefully next week we have some good news and we can talk about the Bills winning the Super Bowl at some point in the future. But until then, see you on the pod.
Go Gophers.
The Bills make me wanna shout, kick your heels up and shout, throw your hands up and shout, throw your head back and shout. Come on now, the Bills are making it happen now. Stand up now, come on and shout, yeah, 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 yeah.
Say you will.
Shout it right now, baby.
Say you will.
Come on, come on,
Say you will.
come on and shout.
Say you will.
Yeah,
Shout.
Buffalo's happening now.
Shout.
We're on the move now.
Shout.
The Bills are happening now.
Shout.
They're making it happen now.
Shout.
We got the spirit,
Shout.
a lot of spirit, yeah.
Shout.
We got the spirit.
Shout.
Just watch it happen now. Hey, 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 hey. Let's go Buffalo.
Let's go Buffalo.
Let's go Buffalo.
Let's go Buffalo.
The Bills make me wanna
Shout.